Coming up, Danny Wolf and Drake Powell impressed during their first games against NBA competition. Will the rookies join Brooklyn's rotation from day one or head to the G League? I'll answer that right now.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's show, I got Lucas Kaplan joining the show to discuss Drake Powell and Danny Wolf's performance during the Nets' pair of Sun matchups. We'll analyze their strengths, weaknesses, and outline expectations for both rookies' campaigns. And joining the pod now, we got Lucas Kaplan from Nets Daily back on the show for the second straight day and third day this week. Lucas putting in that work on Locked On Nets. But we're here to talk about Drake Powell and Danny Wolf, who played their first games against NBA-level competition this weekend in China against the Phoenix Suns, and both did some very exciting things. We're getting to both of those guys and what we think the beginning of their rookie seasons could look like. Where are they NBA G League? And also what should expectations be for them? But wanted to start off with Danny Wolf, who I thought showed some real positives during his first games against NBA competition, because Danny comes in and he's obviously this player who has this really funky role at Michigan. You know, he's a 6'11" point guard. He does all these things. There's questions about how much does this play at the NBA level, some of the ball handling stuff and things along those lines. And look, it's preseason. He's playing in the fourth quarter against a lot of backups on a Phoenix Suns team, so I'm not setting anything in stone, but I think it's a positive that a lot of those skills did look like they played in these games against the Suns. I mean, you're looking at what he did in terms of flashing his offensive versatility. There were some moves where he's taking guys off the dribble. Come on, Malawach, multiple plays, who's, you know, a top 10 pick, taking him off the dribble. He's hitting threes, some legit transition ball handling and playmaking flashes. Really looked like a dribble pass shoot threat. So I was very encouraged by what we saw with Danny Wolf. And, you know, it's a guy who's the oldest of the rookies. He's a 21-year-old, and it does look like some of his NBA skills are going to play out of the gate. So, Lucas, what was your main takeaway from what we saw from Danny during these Suns matchups?
Just that you can really see why some people had him lottery. He was a very divisive prospect. You know, some people had him outside the first round, but like Sam Vecini, right, of the Athletics Draft podcast, I believe, had Avena, and who does, you know, really good and thorough work, had him like 12th or 13th. And you see why. Like, to keep it very short, just a matchup problem for no matter who, you know, is guarding him.
Yeah, and you look at it offensively, I think we saw more of him being a problem off the bounce for bigger guys. But like theoretically, you look at him, he's going to be a guy who is quick and has ball handling and shake that will present issues for centers. And then with his size, you know, played 2 years at Yale, being a traditional like post up big, should be able to post up some smaller guys. Like that's the sell with him. And I think that you saw, like, I was just really impressed by the ball handling. And obviously I know that he can do that, and we've seen him do that against college level competition. But there were some moves like that one move where he went between his legs, he drove to his right, kind of stopped on a dime, went behind his back, like in the paint, and finished with a left hand over Kaman Malawach. Really impressive play. Another one where he just got the ball at the top of the key. Quick jab, step to his right, gets downhill, like really quick and efficient, finishes with the left hand over Malawach. Like those things are really impressive to me. And then the ball handling and the passing, like if you watch the Nets Scout series, you listen to them, and they were really high on what he does as a ball handler. Like, one of the scouts said he's a legit like 6'11", 250 primary ball handler. And I've never seen that before. Another scout said he's, you know, you don't get a guy at this position who can be a connector and a ball handler like this. Like that was roughly the verbiage that he used. So I just think that those things are really encouraging out of the gate. But there is this question about what spot is Danny gonna play, and how are they gonna utilize him? I know that you have some opinions on this. Just what are you trending towards? Because he is such a unique prospect, and there are such questions about how will he be best utilized at the next level.
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think he's just a 5. Like, he's so big, and that I think is one of the real green flags, is that he's not doing this at tweener size. He's doing this at center size. Again, legit 6'11 and a half, like 250, and like looks the part and will probably turn some of the, gonna sound demeaning, some of the baby fat into muscle and just get a little bit more explosive. But he's still gonna be 6'11, whatever, 250, 245. That is, even if he doesn't have the vertical pop of a lot of centers in the league, it's big enough to contest shots and just kind of be a force around the rim. And again, we saw it in Summer League. I remember that first game, I was like, dang, he looks not great. And you look down and he has like 3 steals and 4 blocks. Active hands. And I just think his ability to be a tough guard will be from being this funky, like offbeat driver with the pump fakes and the hezzies and the in and outs and the between the legs, and less so of a strength creator. It just seems to me like that's what he's more comfortable doing. And then if he's being guarded by the opposing center and, you know, theoretically that paint is open, it just allows him more room to operate, which hopefully, you know, mitigates some of his turnovers. Hopefully it allows guys to cut into that open paint and he can see them. And so I just really see him being a matchup problem primarily for bigger guys. And that is why I view him as a 5 in conjunction with the size.
So did you come to that conclusion, the 5, based more off of offensive stuff, or also taking the defensive end into consideration? Because that's where a lot of the questions have been about Danny, is the defensive end of, he's this big grounded center. Can he play with some of these more vertically explosive 5s? And then if he's not at the 5, hang with some of these ball handling wings and forwards. So which end did you kind of see the positives more of him being a center?
I would say 60-40 defense offense. I think all the defensive concerns are true, but he is, again, real big and he has good hands. And I think if you can teach positioning and, you know, kind of awareness, that can play on the interior, even if he's not, you know, blocking 2 shots a game. But the thing that I just don't really see is, man, to be like a wing in this league, you have to fly around the court. It is so damn hard. And I don't want Danny, I think, in an optimal role, having to stunt to the wing and then fly to the corner and dig at the nail and then rotate out. Like, it's just not what his frame is for, to me.
Yeah, and there's, you know, it's not to say that, like, this isn't going to be set in stone. Like, he can play multiple.
Right, of course.
Positions. We're seeing the NBA get bigger now. This is just, you know, and like we said, he'll present matchup problems at both positions. This is just us deliberating which spot is he going to spend the majority of his time at.
Right.
And this offseason, following the draft, after watching some of his tape, watching Summer League, I landed in the same place as you, that I think that he's best suited to be a center. I've talked to multiple draft people following the draft. Some said, you know, had the other opinion, but most aligned with us on him being a center. And I just think that he presents so many matchup problems at center. And I think that if you're looking at the way to make him the most unique, I think playing him at center is that answer. And I think the question in conjunction with that is, can he hold up at center defensively? And I think, like you made this point prior, I think on a prior show that we did over the summer, but I think with his IQ, his understanding of positioning, he'll be able to do that stuff good enough in the role that he plays there. And then offensively, like I've said, if the shooting comes around where, you know, the stroke looks pure, but he did shoot like, you know, he was like low 30s in college. The free throw percentage was under 70%. So there are questions, but the Nets think he's a legit shooter, and he's looked really good in the preseason games thus far in terms of the stroke. If he can shoot, you have a guy offensively who can do 3 things. He can run inverted pick and roll, which is pretty intriguing. He can be a short roll playmaker and finisher, and he could be like a pick and pop or floor spacer. So there's so many things that you can do with him offensively. And also he can be a grab and go guy in transition, handling and facilitating. That's just all those different ways that he can be a matchup problem at the 5 offensively is what really gets me excited about it.
And yeah, and exactly. And to speak very broadly, all of those skills you just mentioned play a little more when you're being guarded by the opposing center, because If he's an average shooter that defenses have to respect, again, plays a lot better at the 5. If he's running inverted, and again, we saw it last night, if it's Malawach guarding him and Jalen Green, I know he didn't play for the Suns, Jalen Green guarding Cam Thomas, that is a lot tougher to guard than if he's being guarded by whoever's playing the 4 for them, like maybe Dylan Brooks or someone like that. I'm forgetting kind of their whole roster. But yeah, the 5 is a matchup problem. And then this is a guy that has turnover concerns and shooting concerns. And with a little bit more shooting around him, both of those are alleviated a little. I made this point with Chuck and Darts on his pod the other day. Great draft podcast. He seems like a guy that Jordy's going to love and hate at the same time. Like, he's going to chew him out for trying to throw a backdoor pass, like over his head, no looking. And then in private, he's going to be like, I love that we have a guy that does that stuff.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And I just think that, if you listen to the Nets draft people and you listen to the way they talked about him and the upside that they see, a lot of that is due to the unique things, the ball handling, the outlier things that he does. And where do you make those things the most unique? It's at center. And a lot of people, like you said, he was a very divisive prospect. A lot of people were surprised that he got to where he did. And then a lot of people just didn't see the vision. But I wrote an article about this. There was at least one general manager who was extremely high on where the Nets got him because the NBA released its GM survey. And I think based on the percentages of me doing the math, there was one GM who voted for Danny as the biggest steal of the draft relative to where he was selected. So that, and by the way, that can't be Sean Marks because you're not allowed to you're not allowed to vote for your own guys. So everybody commenting and saying it was Sean Marks voting for him, it wasn't. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out because Danny is a very unique player. But another player who it's cited during these Suns games was Drake Powell, and a guy who I think surprised a lot of people with how good he looked, having not played in Summer League and coming off an injury, and the questions about his skill set. So we'll get into him, what makes him unique, and how we could see his rookie season playing out. We continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Guys, FanDuel gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays, try player props, and even follow live lines during games. It makes football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Coming back from the break, continuing today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Danny Wolf and Drake Powell with Lucas Kaplan. And Drake, Nets fans got their first look at Drake Powell in a Nets uniform during these China games. He obviously missed Summer League and was limited for the start of training camp with the left knee tendinopathy, and he came on the floor. And I thought that he exceeded my expectations. Like, I thought that he looked comfortable out there. Obviously, he's a 3-and-D guy. I think the defense looked like it played right away. Like, we saw him making things really uncomfortable for multiple Suns ball handlers at the point of attack. We saw him, he was 3 of 6 from 3 over these first 2 games. Like, he looked confident. And then the ball handling and some of the stuff that were the questions about him, like you mentioned Sam Vecini before this. I think Sam had the stat that Drake had the lowest usage rate of any wing to be drafted in the first round, like ever, I think. He had like a 13% usage rate last year in North Carolina. The ball handling and stuff, it's nothing to write home about, but it looked a little bit better than I expected it to. So I think all of those areas, I would say, in my opinion, that he had seeded some expectations for me during his first games against NBA competition.
I think this is going to offend you as a football player and Keon Johnson, who played 2,000 minutes for this team last year, so I hesitate. But, I mentioned Chuck and Darts. Chuck compared him to Keon Johnson just as these hyper-athletic, wingy, guard-sized guys that are really combine superheroes, and then, we see what kind of skills they have in the league. Keon, oftentimes, even in a higher usage role with the Nets where he was actually asked to handle and shoot, looks like a football player with extreme athleticism playing basketball. Drake at least looks like a basketball player. albeit maybe not a great one at first. Is that fair to say?
What do you mean by that? Looks like a football player.
You
What
know
do
exactly. You know what it means. You know, a
just
little bit of the
athletic with no skills.
you know, the movements are a little robotic, the handles, the shot.
Okay. I've gotten that from time to time, so I take offense, but I resent it. And I have tape, men's league tape to back it up. So maybe
Okay,
I'll throw that up here at some point. But
listen, football players can still put you in the rim, so I should not.
I don't know if you saw, but the Long Island Nets had their G League like open tryouts recently, and they had Jonathan Casillas, who was a longtime NFL linebacker, there. If you guys want to see what Lucas is talking about, go look at the videos of Jonathan Casillas at Long Island Nets open player tryouts. It did look it looked like a football player. But I think that Drake, he looked pretty fluid. I mean, I think the comparison of him to Keon, like I get it in terms of the hyper athleticism, but I would say that I think that, Drake has better size, first of all, and also he was a much better 3-point shooter, albeit on a small sample size and in one season in college, but he did have that going for him, whereas Keon was never really a decent 3-point shooter at any stop.
No, and Drake's catch and shoot stuff was good. It's just this guy, he's going to be, barring a miracle, a very low usage NBA player, because low usage guys that come off the bench for like a decent UNC team, that's not a guy who's going to walk in a high usage in the NBA. But the way you improve when you are asked to handle the ball, when you are asked to, handle a closeout situation, is by getting on the court and getting real reps against NBA teams. And you can see Drake's path to getting minutes just based on some play finishing, if he can cut and finish a little bit and just create stuff on the defensive end. You can say, oh, well, we can throw this guy out here a little bit, and then that'll hopefully bring along the low usage offensive stuff. So I think Nets fans should be encouraged by the very, very little they've seen in that he looks like a guy who could get minutes, not right away, but soon-ish, because he has some marketable skills.
Yeah, and I think you saw why like some people were lower on Drake relative to where he got selected, which was 22nd overall by the Nets. And I think it speaks to some things that we've talked about with some other players and evaluations of them, is like if you look at the playoffs and the direction that the NBA is trending, the days of just like parking some of these guys in the corner and them being like just strictly 3-point shooters, it's trending further away from that. Like a lot of these guys have to do things. They have to make decisions. They have to have these secondary skills. And Drake, obviously, with his usage rate and his, lack of doing those things in North Carolina, it was a really big concern. But if he can develop in some of those areas, there is some upside based on his athleticism and some of those things. And we saw a few possessions, nothing like great, but we saw a few possessions in these Suns games where he was trying to handle in the pick and roll. He was trying to do some of those things, and he didn't do anything great, but it wasn't on those plays where I was like, oh my God, like this looks really rough. Like, what was your opinion of the limited things that we did try to see from him, or we did see from him when he was putting the ball on the floor?
Just that it's going to take a long time before he can handle any sort of second side usage. And this is why some were lower on him. He also like found himself in situations where he had the ball at the top of the key and there wasn't really an advantage. Like, I would like to see some more situations where he gets run off the line on a closeout and all of a sudden he has an advantage to play with and it's like 4-on-3. Like, I don't think he'll be setting up pick and rolls for a long, long time, if ever. And I think that's kind of the situations he was thrown in against Phoenix. So I am totally in wait and see mode, and I would like to get 20 games of him, even if it's in Long Island, just having to do stuff, even if it's like transition, 3-on-2, starting with the basics.
Yeah, that might have been why he exceeded my expectations in that regard, because I was surprised that he was in those spots to begin with. And then when it didn't look like completely awful, I was like, okay, like that's something. But yeah, like the strength with Drake is obviously like the 3-point shooting was pretty good at North Carolina, albeit on small sample size. But the transition game, the play finishing and the half court, him being a guy who pretty consistently makes the right play in terms of doing some of those things. But he is an elite play finisher. Like if you're talking about the Nets trying to, cultivate a team that can be in transition. And I think that that's a big thing that shouldn't be underrated when you're looking at this Nets draft class of getting all these guys, including Danny Wolf, potentially at center, who can be guys who can handle the ball in transition, pass, and you have guys like Drake Powell, filling the wings and doing some of these things. Like, it could make for some exciting basketball, but some of those skills that he has or, doesn't have in terms of the usage and the ball handling could answer some questions about where he's going to be to start the regular season. Is he in Long Island? Is he with Brooklyn? I've seen some fans who are very excited about this, saying that, is he the most NBA ready of the Nets first round picks? So Lucas and I will give our takes on that, where we think Drake will be at the beginning of the season when we close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. The holidays are going to be here before you know it, which is exciting, but getting your home ready for guests and celebrations can feel like a lot. Maybe your serveware needs a refresh or the guest room could use new bedding. Wayfair has everything you need to get your home holiday ready, from Christmas trees and wreaths to bedding, cookware, and outdoor inflatables. It's your one-stop shop for every room in the house. Wayfair makes it easy to personalize your home for the holidays with a huge selection for every style and budget. And with free and easy delivery, even on the big stuff, you can get everything you need without the hassle of huge delivery fees. Guys, I recently ordered some new holiday decor from Wayfair, and it completely transforms the living room. The decorations and throw pillows immediately make the space feel warm and festive. I love how easy it is to find pieces that fit the style and budget you're looking for. Everything is in one place, and checkout is a breeze. Delivery is fast and free, which was a lifesaver during this busy time of year. So get organized, refreshed, and ready for the holidays for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Basketball season is here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Guys, I've used the Game Time app to grab seats, and it couldn't have been simpler. I had great seats in minutes. I love that what you see is what you pay. There are no hidden fees at checkouts. Plus, I could see exactly what my view looked like before I bought the tickets with their in-app seat view feature. Their zone deals are also a game changer. You pick the section, Game Time picks your seats, and you save big. You can even find NBA tickets for under $25. Guys, take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, tickets, go. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Lucas Kaplan about Drake Powell's first games in a Nets uniform. And Drake looked good by all accounts, but we did talk at length about how there are these skills that are going to take a long time for Drake to develop, and reps, on-ball reps, is going to be big for that in terms of him being a ball handler, being a second side guy, being a decision maker. And, a lot of that has led me to believe, in things that I've heard from some other people, that he's going to spend some time in Long Island to start the year. And I have a feeling I know that that's going to disappoint some Nets fans who want all these rookies to be playing right away, and who are also encouraged by what he did during these Suns games. I've seen it thrown around like Drake Powell is the Nets' most NBA-ready rookie, and I pretty strongly disagree. And I understand why people think that, because he is like this 3-and-D guy, and I think people think you have the athleticism, you can shoot threes, you can just plug them in right away, and I understand that to a certain extent, but the other stuff is so far behind that I feel pretty confident in saying that guys like Yegor Dioman, Ben Saraf, Danny Wolf are more NBA ready than Drake is. And I think that Drake is going to spend some time in the G League to start the year.
Well, I think people mistakenly view a lack of impact as being more NBA ready than negative impact. Like, just because Saraf might have a game where he is 2 of 7 and he's 0 of 4 from 3 and he has like 4 turnovers to 2 assists, which isn't a bad game for a guard, doesn't mean he's less NBA ready than if Powell goes out there and goes 1 for 3 and you don't really notice him because he's in the corner most of the time, and you might not see him have a defensive miscommunication on the backside because that stuff is just inherently less noticeable. and he's less involved in like the on-ball action. He's not ready for the NBA. I mean, he was, again, a very low usage player on a mediocre North Carolina team last year. And that being said, the G League is going to be really good for him. He had great catch and shoot numbers at UNC. He had really good at the rim numbers, but they were just such small sample sizes that I'm less worried about needing to see it translate to the NBA right away than wanting to see how he's going to get these shots and these opportunities in an expanded role, even if that expanded role is in the G League to start right away. And I think it's going to be a lot of that.
Yeah, I think him getting a chance to do some of those things that he's not good at against like an intermediate level of competition between the NBA and college, that's going to be a positive for him, and that's going to be a good thing. And I understand why fans want to see him right away, but it also must be said that the Nets have just so many wings. Like we've talked about this before. They have obviously, they have MPJ, they have Haywood Highsmith, they have Terrence Mann. They have all these guys that are going to be, you know, probably trying to get or are going to get NBA minutes to start the year. And having Drake in the G League to start the year is going to allow him to work on some of those things. And then he is definitely going to get NBA minutes. It's just not going to be right out of the gate. I think there will be moves made at the deadline for the Nets. I think regardless, Drake will get into the lineup. There's injuries and all those things, but the G League is going to be a positive in some of those areas. Let's close it out with Danny Wolf. I think based on things that I've heard, also I spoke to Jordy Fernandez, and Jordy unprompted, it was almost like maybe a Freudian slip, but he said, you know, when I asked him about developing Danny Wolf, he said, we're going to have to use the G League. And then he kind of like paused and was like, well, we're gonna have to use all of our tools. That could include the NBA too. But I'm like, I'm pretty confident that Danny is going to be in the G League early in the year also. And that's not that surprising given that the Nets have, Nick Claxton and Day'Ron Sharpe at center. And then they also have Michael Porter Jr. and Noah Clowney at power forward. Yeah. But is that also your expectation? And, you know, I think there is an argument to be made though, that Danny is NBA, more NBA ready than some of these other rookies based on the skills that he has right now.
And the age. I think he'll play less in the G League than Powell and maybe even Nolan, but I see him maybe having like a pretty even split. It's just, let's say there's a week where Zaire, Noah, MPJ, Clax, and Day'Ron are all healthy. And, God knows that won't be every single week for this team. But if there is, do you really want Danny to come up and play 8 minutes, on a second quarter rotation and a late third quarter rotation? Or do you want him to play 30 minutes as the Nets? What they've historically done is they've used the G League to mine info and data from these guys. Like Noah Clowney's rookie season, they pushed him to the limit and they figured out, you know what, he's not a center because we have all of this data from our G League team. And that looks like the right call. Like he just doesn't seem like he's going to be a 5, the body or the skill set. And I think that's kind of what they're going to do with Danny, because if he's not playing in the NBA, they need to figure out, okay, not just what position is he, but all those actions you mentioned at the top. Is he better, inverted pick and roll, or is he more of a spot up guy? How well does he see cutters? Is he better at the dump off pass or the kick out pass? Like, should we have a guy in the dunker spot when he's handling the ball, or should we go 5 out? These are all the things that you can really get a feel for in the G League, and that's how they've used the Long Island Nets. And for guys that aren't obvious immediate projections, like Danny, like Drake, that's what it's there for. So I think Danny's more of an even split, but there's a reason for both, Yeah,
and I agree. And I think that there is an argument for the NBA readiness of him with the age and some of the skills that he does have, but they're going to need to see what he is. And the G League is a good place to do that. And they have all these guys ahead of him. And could some of those guys maybe not be there when the middle of the season comes around, the trade deadline, when there's injuries and all those things? Like, he's going to get into the NBA, as is Drake. But I would expect, those guys in the beginning of the year to be spending time in Long Island. But that's all we have for today's episode. Lucas, appreciate you taking the time as always. And we're going to be at the regular season opener before we know it. So we'll have talk about that and a lot more other stuff. But thanks for taking the time, man. That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys enjoyed the talk with Lucas. If you do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you have a second and you enjoy the content, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. We got the Nets' final preseason game, and then we're rolling on into the regular season. So I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.